everyone, today we're going to talk about flying with your service dog. Flying with your service dog can feel overwhelming, especially if it's your first time or maybe you had a negative experience in the past. Don't worry though, I've got you covered. In today's video, I'm breaking down what you need to know to make sure that your next flight with your service dog is stress-free. Before we dive in though, I just wanted to quickly introduce myself for those of you who may not know me. My name is Lisa. I'm a certified professional dog trainer and an Atlas Assistance Dogs certified dog trainer, Canine Good Citizen evaluator, and Catch Dog Training Academy mentor. And I love sharing force-free dog training tips with all of you. If you want more content like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and notification bell to be notified every time I post a new video. Okay, so enough of me talking. Let's go ahead and dive right into the important aspects of what you need to know when it comes to flying with your service dog. Step one is to know the airline's policies. Before you book your ticket, be sure to look up your specific airline's service dog policy. Most airlines in the US will have pretty similar policies. However, you still want to double check and make sure you actually read through them. Some of the rules can vary slightly. Most US airlines are going to require that you fill out a Department of Transportation service animal air travel form, which you'll need to submit at least 48 hours typically prior to your flight, or at least bring it with you to check in. Once again, read through your airline's policies and it will tell you what you need to do. Now know that when you're filling out this form, it's going to ask for your trainer. Per the ADA, it is completely acceptable to put self-training as your trainer. You're allowed to self-train your service dog. What you shouldn't do is lie. And I am actually really surprised. I have a lot of people that I've never heard of put my name as their trainer. And unfortunately, they ask me if I'm familiar with this person, with this client, and I have to say no. And that worst case is a federal crime that you could be charged for. But typically what's gonna happen is the airline will either ban your service dog from flying with you or ask you for the correct trainer, which is the best case scenario. But you can avoid all of this by simply putting yourself as the trainer because you self-trained your service dog. Or of course, if you did actually work with a trainer, you can put their name, and I would just make sure you talk to them and be sure that they think your dog is ready to fly. I have a video on how to fill out the Department of Transportation form. It's really easy, but if you want me to walk you through it, I will link to that video up above in the cards or in the description below. Okay, so enough of rambling about who to put for the trainer, but I do want to mention that when you do submit the form, as a extra precaution to relieve any stress you have on the day of your flight, be sure to give them a call or chat with one of the representatives just to ensure that they received your form. Step two is to ensure that your dog is fully ready for supporting you at the airport. Your service dog is there to help make your life easier, not add more stress to your life. You want to make sure that you are fully prepared and your dog is prepared for all the sensory overload that's going to happen at the airport. Whether it's loud noises, crowds, suitcases, random voices over the intercom, it's a lot. And just as a side note, since a lot of people are not aware, we do not want our dogs to go on walking sidewalks or escalators, not just at the airport, but ever. You should always take the elevator or the stairs because it can cause injuries to dogs. So just a side note, don't go on escalators or moving sidewalks. That said, it's a good idea if you've never flown with your dog to at least visit the public spaces of the airport. So public spaces are going to be before you go through security. That way you can practice walking through crowded areas, have your dog see suitcases, and practice training in environments where they have the loud intercom and people talking over the speakers. You also want to make sure your dog knows how to potty on cue, so you can make sure your dog relieves themselves before your flight. If you want a full training plan on exactly what distractions to prep for, what behaviors your dog should know, and more, I include a full training plan in my course, Prepping to Fly with Your Service Dog. I've included a link below as well as a coupon code to bring down the cost. This is a steal, so be sure to grab it by heading down to the link below. Next, let's talk about getting through TSA. Typically, TSA will not separate separate you from your service dog. But because not every staff pays attention to all of their training and all of the rules and regulations, which they should, but just in case, you do want to practice some separation training where you have someone else hold your dog and they can be okay and not freak out if you have to step away for an extra check for a few minutes. You also want to make sure that your dog is okay being pat down, because if your harness has any type of metal on it, their collar has metal on it, which typically it will, also their leash will probably have metal on it, they're going to have to pat down your dog. I should mention that Bold Lead Designs has a metal-free leash specifically for getting through TSA, and I'll include a link to it below. And I have a referral code where it's like one of those like, I give you $10 off, I get $10 off, and I'll include that in the description below as well. I'm saving for a new leash. So if you do use that code, thanks for helping me out. But I do want to mention that, you know, TSA is always kind of unpredictable. So even with that leash, technically, they could still ask to pat down your dog if they choose to, but it just helps take some of that extra pressure off. And they're typically not going to if you have that metal-free leash, because they're not going to set off the metal detector. I just don't want people later in the comments being like, I got the leash and I still got checked, because I cannot control what TSA does. Whenever I use this leash, I've never had any issues going through TSA. If you do have your dog's collar or harness or things like that, you can always take those off as you go through TSA and just use that metal-free leash to prevent having your dog to have extra pat downs. And even if your dog is completely fine with the pat down, I always try to reduce stress as much as possible and reduce trigger stacking for my dog, because there are a lot of possible triggers that can happen at the airport. So we want to prevent trigger stacking, and so the more relaxed and stress-free you can make it, the better. Also, remember to always treat your dog after any stressful moments as well to help prevent some of that trigger stacking. Once on board, your service dog should be able to sit or lay comfortably underneath your feet. Now, this kind of goes in the planning stage as well, but if you have a bigger dog, I typically recommend that you try to buy at least Economy Plus so that there's space for your dog to lay down. But with how expensive flights are, I do not blame you for not wanting to do that. But your dog will need to know how to lay down underneath the seat. And we all know that economy is not the most comfortable space in the world. And so you'll just want to train your dog to be okay with those narrow spaces. If your dog struggles with tight spaces, you can always practice with chairs and different setups at home, or at the library is another option. Typically the meeting rooms will have a lot of chairs. So if you don't have, 30 chairs at home, which most of us don't, and you want to set up kind of like that airplane setup, you can always use the library chairs. Like I said, every library is going to be different, but I know many libraries do have meeting rooms with chairs. Know that flight attendants and the staff that's at the boarding area are typically going to be trained to look out for any service dogs that are not acting like service dogs. So if you need a moment for your dog to decompress, I personally recommend finding a corner for your dog to decompress that's quiet, away from the front area, just because, they're not gonna understand that some dogs can have bad days sometimes. Service dogs are not robots. We're gonna train them as best as we can and make sure they have the right temperament to make sure that our dogs are safe, as well as the general public is going to stay safe. However, the boarding staff and the flight attendants are not always going to fully understand that, especially with the rise of people bringing dogs that aren't technically service dogs onto flights. So just keep in mind that if your dog is having an off moment or anything like that, find a space away from the boarding staff area just to allow them to decompress, and also to allow yourself to not be overly stressed as well, because your dog can feed off of your anxiety. We also want to make sure that we're bringing kind of activities for our dogs to do, like maybe a nice little lick mat or a popsicle. I love popsicles. I love their bite and chew toy as well. I also like to bring some squeeze treats so that my dogs can have something to lick to distract them if there's something really intense and scary at the airport. You just never know what to expect, or maybe there is another dog that's aggressive. I find that a lot of times the TSA agents' dogs, or even the agriculture dogs that are walking around, basically just working dogs for the Department of Transportation, can be kind of reactive. And so I don't want my dog to be stressed over one of the TSA agents' dogs barking and lunging. So I'll bring some lick treats to help them kind of relax, because licking can help them relax as well. I've included a link to some of my favorite enrichment products below. Yes, they are affiliate links, but they help me out a lot, and I only recommend things that I personally use anyway. And a lot of them will have a special discount for you for your first time purchase. Other tips include making sure you're not feeding your dog a ton of new treats or food right before their flight or the day before, because you don't want a dog with diarrhea on the flight. And of course, making sure you bring all of those essentials, like a nice little water bowl for your dog so they can have water if needed, extra food in case your flight gets delayed, like if they need dinner, as well as maybe some toys or chews that are non-food related to give your dog something to do. All in all, most airline staff are going to really appreciate a well-trained service dog. And we want to keep a positive reputation for service dogs as a whole, so that other people, like other passengers and other staff, will see how great these animals are. And that way airlines don't start lobbying for stricter rules or even just not allowing service dogs in general. We definitely don't want that to happen. So the best way to prevent that is by preparing yourself and preparing your dog to keep everyone safe. The last thing you want is to be sued for having your dog get over threshold because they're trigger sacked and end up biting someone or even jumping and knocking a child over, which technically isn't aggressive behavior, but could still get you in legal trouble. And so just being prepared as possible. I'm sure you don't want a viral YouTube news video on how your service dog bit someone or knocked over someone. I'm not trying to use any scare tactics or anything like that, but just realistically, we want to make sure that we keep a positive reputation for service dogs and we don't get ourselves into legal trouble, especially in this economy. All right, so that's it for today's video. To recap, flying with your service dog doesn't have to be stressful as long as you're preparing ahead of time. As I already mentioned, if you want any step-by-step training plans for navigating the airport, TSA, and flying with ease, be sure to check out my airport training mini course and use the discount code. Everything will be in the description below. I'm also wondering, what is your biggest concern when it comes to flying with your service dog? Be sure to let me know in the comments below. All right, and with that being said, I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.